What if you could build a startup without knowing how to code? Not hire a developer, not wait 6 months, not raise a pre-seed round just to afford an engineer and engineering team, just build it yourself. That's been the promise of vibe coding. A lot of you have probably dove into vibe coding, you see it, you're trying it, and right now, thousands of you are taking that bet. Today, we're breaking down whether or not vibe coding is the ultimate unlock for non-technical founders, or a fast path to shipping something that quietly falls apart. Welcome back to Prompted, where we break down AI startups and tech with real operator thinking. I'm Cory. Let's get into it. So, is vibe coding really the future, or is it a liability? I'll start with the bullish case because honestly, what's been happening right now is pretty remarkable. Tools like Cursor, Replit, Lovable, Claude Code have changed the equation completely on software development. Non-technical founders can go from idea to working prototype in a few hours rather than a few months. Not a mock-up, not a wireframe, an actual functional prototype. And that's pretty new. That used to require hiring a developer, UI and UX designers, going through a discovery phase, burning weeks before you had anything to show. And now you can validate an idea before you spend $1 on engineering. You can build internal tools without a ticket queue, which is pretty cool. You can show up to investor meetings with a real demo and not just a deck. So speed to validation has been like an insane unlock. And for non-technical founders especially, that changes everything. So the bullish case is simple. Vibe coding gives you leverage you didn't have before. So why wouldn't you use it? Now, here's where I pump the brakes. Because the same thing that makes vibe coding powerful is exactly what makes it dangerous. You're moving fast without fully understanding what you're building. The code works until it doesn't. And when it breaks, you often don't know why. There's usually security holes you can't see, scalability gaps that don't show up until you have real users, logic errors buried 3 layers deep. The product looks finished, but finish and production ready are very different things. And here's the part that really matters. A non-technical founder doesn't know what they don't know. You ship something that feels solid. A user finds an edge case, or worse, a bad actor does. And you have no idea how to diagnose it, how to fix it, or prevent it from happening again. You get into this prompting loop. That's not a tool problem, that's a ceiling problem. So where do I actually land? Vibe coding is one of the most powerful tools available to non-technical founders right now, but it does have a ceiling. And the founders who win will be the ones who know exactly where that ceiling is. The tool isn't the liability. Mistaking a prototype for a product, that's the liability. So here's how I think about it. There's 3 lanes. Green light, vibe code freely, landing pages, internal dashboards, proof of concept builds, early MVPs for user feedback, and demo environments. In these contexts, speed wins, you're testing, not shipping to scale. If it breaks, the stakes are low. This is where vibe coding genuinely is elite. Yellow light, proceed carefully with customer-facing product features, anything touching payments, auth flows and user data, third-party API integrations. You can vibe code here, of course, but you need someone, even a part-time technical advisor, to review what you've built before it goes live. Don't skip that step. Red light, bring in real engineering. Anything at scale, security-sensitive systems, infrastructure decisions, architecture that will compound over time. Vibe coding here isn't a shortcut. It's technical debt you'll pay back with interest. Know the lane you're in. That's the whole framework. We have had multiple clients that have been jumping onto the vibe coding train, which is fantastic. As a software, agency and a software company, you can either go 2 ways about it. You can be pissed about it, or you can lean into it. We've been leaning into it. We encourage our clients to vibe code. We encourage them to spend time understanding the tools and be able to show us exactly what they're looking for. Sometimes it's easier than just explaining it. They can just show us, be like, this is what I want to happen. Let's just make it right. And I think that's not something that we can shy away from. It means that we absolutely can move a bit quicker because we see where they want to go, and we can help them architect the right solution for what they just vibe coded. And even recently, we've actually just been teaching people how to vibe code, how to use AI properly to do correct coding on how we fundamentally do it ourselves. And so we've actually been running AI hackathons for people as well too, to show them how to properly use stuff like Claude Code. One really interesting thing that I've noticed though over the last little while is that because vibe coding is so quick, I think a lot of founders feel like they vibe code 80% of what needs to be done and that there's only 20% left. But really, they've probably vibe coded the first 20%, and the remaining 80% is still yet to be done. They just don't know what that looks like. That often lives in infrastructure and dev operations. It often lives in quality assurance and testing. It often lives in security. There is a whole bunch of things that I think are not considered when vibe coding, especially around scalability as well too. Like, what resources will you require just to start versus what resources will you need when you have 10,000 users? They're very, very different. And so right now, I think there's an expectation because they move very quickly on the first 20% that they believe the next 80 will be just as quick, when that's not necessarily the case. We still spend a lot of time planning, thinking, being the right orchestrator of AI. Because often when you're vibe coding, you just jump into the build. You're just doing it. You're just going, you're prompting, you're doing all these things. But if you're not taking the time to step back and think about really the user flows, about how you want to build it, what do you want it to look like, how you want the logic to work, you'll end up basically prompting so much and wasting your time. And so that's where we spend a lot of time thinking about how all this stuff works so that we can properly go prompt and orchestrate AI and AI agents to go build these things. Garbage in, garbage out. That's basically it. And so I've constantly seen, a lot of these vibe coded tools. They're like, oh, wait, pretty much works. But then I go play around with it and I find a bunch of bugs and errors, and they're like, oh, well, it kind of almost works. I'm like, yeah, no, it kind of almost works, but it's cool enough to see what you need, but it isn't always perfect. And so that is kind of the thing I'm noticing, is this expectation of build time wanting to be a lot quicker because they got to that point very fast and assume the rest can be quick too, when that necessarily isn't the case. Yes, we can move a lot faster with AI, but it doesn't mean that you should at the expense of like security and scalability. And so those are two things that like is really top of mind for us right now. And we're trying to like now tamper expectations and like educate people on like why it is that you maybe can't move that quick or shouldn't move that quick. So that is just an interesting kind of anecdote that we're seeing and exploring and trying to navigate in our own business, because we don't want to shy away from the vibe coding trend. We want to properly empower people to use it, but we also need to set expectations and teach people what the right way is to go about vibe coding. Another interesting thing I've thought about with this vibe coding, a lot of people have been like, you don't need engineers, you don't need developers, you don't need all these things because you have AI agents to do it. And it's true to a point. All these AI agents can do all the coding itself. Engineers have never really been just coders. Engineers have been orchestrators and planners and problem solvers and making correct judgments. And they've had to a lot of times, do research and then implement that code. Now the way we just implement that code is through AI as a medium. And so the job of an engineer actually is still very similar, funny enough. And I actually still think very useful, because with vibe coding, the one thing I've seen is that just because you can doesn't mean you should. And what I mean by this is that a lot of non-technical founders are building these amazing prototypes and products that are semi-functional or functional enough, and they want to ship and they want to sell, which is perfect. I always think you should almost pre-sell and ship as quick as you possibly can. But then when the first set of bugs start coming in, maintenance is required. There's like an API key error or something like that happens. They start getting into these prompting loops of not knowing how to fix it without breaking other things in the application, because often all these vibe coded apps are just running on a single main branch and always in production, and there isn't multiple environments, and things start to break. And that's often why I don't think engineers will disappear, why I don't think software agencies will disappear. Just where we live is a little bit different. And so that's kind of what we're seeing right now, is that people want to do their job and role that is their zone of genius, sales, marketing, all this stuff. They don't want to be the ones fixing bugs, maintaining the product, improving the product. They got to that initial point, they just want to hand it off. And so that's fine, right? But like, I think anyone that's out there building right now, I believe there is this hype and novelty to learning something new and be able to explore something that you never been able to explore before. But I do think that we're going to come down from this, and that people are going to have built all these things and not want to maintain it, not want to improve it, not want to deal with all the bugs. So with like, I often tell people, if they've worked with us before, every bug, every new idea, every request that you send our way to improve on products, imagine if that was just sent back to you, right? And that can be a little bit daunting. There is a lot of work often within the troubleshooting, finding bugs, figuring things out, improving logic that I think is behind the scenes and not really understood as well. But I think it's important for us to educate and teach people that. So just another anecdote that I've noticed recently in the vibe coding era. Okay, we're gonna do a quick rapid fire right now. No overthink for me. Best vibe coding tool right now. For pure speed, I would say Lovable for most non-technical founders. For control, Cursor. And then if you have time, I would say Claude Code is definitely the champion across the board. So if you had to go learn one of them right now, I would say Claude Code. Can a vibe coded product raise a seed round? 100%. We've been seeing it like crazy. I think you should go take vibe coded products to raise seed rounds because, again, you don't just have a pitch deck anymore. You actually have this product that you can show with like semi functionality to see how it works. And you might even actually have like pilots or early users on it already, which is fantastic. Will software engineers become obsolete? I kind of just answered this. No. But the ones who can't work alongside AI tools or who are against the vibe coding trends, I think will struggle. Okay, what's one thing you'd never vibe code? Anything that touches user payment data or really secure data, I would vibe code up until you actually need the live production functionality. But I wouldn't like vibe code a full platform to just do that. Is vibe coding a skill or a shortcut? It's a skill if you use it with intention. It's a shortcut if you use it to avoid understanding what you're building. AI trend of the week. Before we wrap, here's one trend you should watch. I think we're seeing a lot of updates from Claude Code now competing with some of the features that we've seen in OpenClaw. And so I think what we're going to see now is really this race for agent infrastructure, where all these agents are going to live, the infrastructure they're going to live on. And I think that's something that we should keep a close eye on. But anyways, so I think that's the biggest trends that we've seen recently is like, OpenClaws come in. A lot of people are building their own like wrappers or pre-configurations of OpenClaw to sell. And then Claude Code itself, is constantly adding new features. And of course, people are creating new skills for it all the time as well too. And it's just becoming more powerful every single day. So overall, here's what's impressive. The output quality has gotten really, really good for vibe coded platforms. Early stage founders and business owners are seeing the gap between AI generated and engineered build is closing really fast on a surface level. But here's what's brittle. The moment you hit a non-standard use case or need to scale beyond a few hundred users or integrate with a complex external or legacy system, the seams start to show. These tools are being marketed as production ready. Some of them aren't there yet. So the question to ask isn't, can I build this with AI? It's what happens when this breaks at the worst possible time. The founders who combine vibe coding with even basic technical oversight, whether that's a part-time CTO, a technical advisor, a developer on retainer, or an agency team, they will outperform the ones going fully unsupervised. That's the edge right now. Automation plus oversight every single time. Non-technical founders have never had more power to build, and that's real. But the ones who win won't just ship fast. They'll know when to hand it off. Vibe code the prototype, engineer the product. That's the play. If this gives you something to think about, share it with another founder, and I'll see you on the next episode of Prompted.